Hello and welcome to the Speakeasy.
I'm Zach.
And I'm Jake.
We are the Dirt Road Men. You're running out of whiskey there, buddy.
It's not your fault.
And we've featured it a couple of times, but we have Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit here. We'll review it probably in like 4 or 5 weeks. So,
yeah.
We like to film ahead on our whiskey reviews because this is the most expensive thing we mess with, and we're not big enough to get donations that we can't even film like the vault. Did you see the Whiskey Vault guys are now the number 1 in 3 channels?
Yeah.
They made a Ralphie sandwich.
Yeah, that was great. If you don't know who they are, definitely check out the Austin Whiskey Vault.
Yep. They're really cool guys. I think the only complaint I've ever had with them didn't come directly from them. But
what was that?
It was when we were in the group and some people had that jerry can flask and we figured out how to get it and offer it to them for less money.
Yeah.
And I got booted as soon as I showed it. It's like, man, I checked your guys' site to make sure you weren't selling it too. I'm just trying to help everybody out. It just so happens I run a business.
Yeah.
And so I can offer it to these people for less. And they were like, don't market in our marketing group.
Yeah, because...
But I sent a message to the admin. They let me right back in. It wasn't a big deal. They just told me not to do it again. I was just kind of bummed because I felt like I was helping the community out.
Yeah. That was on the Tribe.
Yeah, that was on the Whiskey Tribe. It wasn't on like the Vaults channel or something. Whiskey Tribe makes your Facebook a lot more enjoyable. You don't have to listen to everybody complain about politics all the time.
You mean Whiskey Book?
Yep. Speaking of complaining about politics, for our talk video today, since, you know, all of our guys from Dapperton's channel really liked our more political, philosophical stuff, I think this fits more into the philosophical realm, but with some science.
Yeah, because there was definitely an experiment.
Our video today is pertaining to, and I'll link it below, the mouse Utopia experiments ran through the 50s to 70s. I'm not sure because of copyright if I can show any of it in here, so I'm not going to try to cut in segments of it for you guys to watch. I'll explain it to you. I highly, highly recommend you go watch the video I sent him, because it goes through kind of all of them. So, let's have a seat. This is going to take a minute.
Yeah,
let me take you guys through what happened in the Mouse Utopia experiments, in case you're not familiar, because I've never met somebody that was familiar. I did find one video with like 1 million views, though.
Oh, wow. Cool.
The Mouse Utopia experiments was this guy tried to figure out what rats would do, mice would do, given a perfect environment. So what he did, the first time I think he did it in the woods, but I'm going to go straight to the last experiment because they all kind of resulted the same way and the last one had the most data. So in the last experiment, he built this habitat that could hold 3,000 mice. And it had an individual like home for each mouse and all this stuff. And they had screens that like food would come through, and they all had like unlimited food, unlimited nesting materials. They made sure there was always more than they would need. And so it took away their need to like forage or compete for anything. Mm-hmm. And he put in, I think it was like 8 mice initially. And the first thing that happened was like they were in kind of like a social turmoil while they were figuring out their hierarchy. Because hierarchies occur in nature.
Yeah.
That's kind of like one of Jordan Peterson's main points. He uses lobsters, but it's everywhere. It's in trees. It's all over the place. Yeah, you can plant... Let's say you plant an entire forest of trees on the same day. Mm-hmm. Some of those trees will get a lot taller than the other trees.
I have seen that just in... Because I do landscaping, and I have seen that in stuff that my boss has done before he had people helping him. He planted like a row of just evergreen trees, and like you'll be going along, there'll be like 3 that are 12 feet tall, and the other one's still like 8, and then there's the next one's right around 12 again, and it's just they're all planted at the exact same time. They're all the exact same height. So okay, that makes sense.
But a lot of the time when you get a bunch in one place, they won't all become the exact same height. Some will rise above others, and you'll get some trees that will, like, if it's concentrated enough, some of them will, like, die out, and the other ones will survive. Right? And You see that in the woods behind my house, for instance. Although there's no way to know if they were all planted at the same time or they all started growing at the same time.
But still,
certainly some of them didn't. But anyway, you see it illustrated through the Pareto principle, and we'll go into that in another video. In another video. I'll explain it later.
I said burritos.
Oh, okay. Then, the mouse population took off, right, eventually. And it kept doubling in population, doubling in population, doubling in population. And then all of a sudden, it tailed off. Like, it slowly uptook, exponential uptake, and it could hold 3,000 mice, right? Mm-hmm. But it leveled out around 2,200. And when it started to level out, this weird thing started happening. So there became some of the less dominant mice would wake up earlier in the morning, and they would go try to get their food earlier. Well, then the more dominant mice eventually would start waking up a little after them and notice they were gone, and they would like barricade their area because the mice started to congregate in just a few spaces so that the other mice couldn't get there. And then the females initially evenly distributed. Then once the more dominant mice became obvious, the dominant mice ended up with like harems of females, and the very non-dominant mice ended up with barely any females between them. And then, as they reached their peak, they got super aggressive, right? They noticed that the other mice would like start biting their tails, and there were almost no mice with no injuries. They would fight all the time, and their population really went into turmoil around this point. They had something called the beauty mice, and the beauty mice were these males that wouldn't engage in mating at all. They wouldn't go out because they could get food and nesting materials in their one little spot. So they'd just stay in their little spot. They would clean themselves all day, eat, and sleep. Mm-hmm. That's it. And because of that, they weren't mating. So then, because all of the mice, like the males, started to drastically outnumber the females, and they would attack them. They would get aggressive about mating when the dominant male wasn't around. And so you would get like mouse rape, essentially. Just in the concentrated spots of mice, the females would get so aggressive that they wouldn't have time to focus on their youngs, and their infant mortality rate skyrocketed. And the amount of birds they were having dropped as well. And like when they would move nests, the mothers would sometimes forget some of their young because they were so focused on defending themselves. Uh-huh. And like even the other mice, the really not very dominant mice, would like sneak and follow them to their little nests, and then like run in and get them then. Mm-hmm. And also they started developing in these harems of female mice. Male mice would go in, but they wouldn't mate with any of the females. They would just kind of try to be a bitch mouse, essentially, for the dominant mouse. And so they developed a lot of homosexual and pansexual mice. And for whatever reason, they just started dying off, even though they had more than everything they could possibly need. And the conclusion that they came to with this experiment was eventually humans' population would get so high that we would just die out. Right? And that was kind of the conclusion that this experiment came to, is if we didn't figure out a solution to overpopulation, and this guy was arguing for introducing like China's law of like child control. Like you can only have so many kids. And
which is
that's
nuts how China did it. We have something similar. If you have too many kids nowadays, and like you have, like say one guy has like 6 baby mamas, and 6 kids or more, the state can order him a vasectomy.
Really?
Yes.
I was unaware of that. That's kind of messed up, although I get the principle.
Yeah.
The conclusions they came to, though, are really grim, and it is something to worry about with our civilization as we keep going up, because it's projected that in a few years, I think around like 2050 or maybe it was 2150, we would level out at a population of about 9 billion people in the world. Mm-hmm. Then it would start to decline. Now, what they're scared of is that decline might end in our extinction if we follow that model, because we're a lot like mice in a lot of ways, our behaviors. Mice can even laugh.
Really?
Yeah. This guy figured out through an experiment he could take a pencil eraser and tickle a mouse, and if you recorded it, you could hear them laugh. They just laugh at a really high pitch that we can't normally hear, and it's really quiet.
That's adorable, really.
Yeah. So in a lot of ways, mice are a lot like humans, especially socially. And so many people are scared because of this experiment that our population is going to level out and we're all going to die like the mice did. And what I think, the conclusion that I came to, and I've only ever heard one other person propose this, I thought it when I first saw it, and then I saw this guy talk about it, and I was surprised that someone else came to the same conclusion. I didn't say it because I thought people would say it was because of my political bent. But I think the thing that caused it wasn't the overpopulation of the mice so much as the central planning and the fact that they only had one dimension to compete across now, which was mating. They no longer had to compete for food. They no longer had to find their own nests. They no longer had to do any of these other things. Those were all provided for them. Now, this sounds a lot like the socialist agenda that people propose today with universal basic income, our current social safety nets of food stamps, and there's even the Marine that I work with that's very socialist, wants to provide like a house for everybody, universal housing. And it sounds pretty when you say it, but I think the central planning of Mouse Utopia, the way that he did it, mirrors that really well, and that took away the state of nature and caused the extinction event. I think that what that experiment says to me is we need to be, the best way to manage human society and human population is very laissez-faire. So...
English, please.
Laissez-faire is a French term meaning something like let it be, or like live and let live. So it's essentially what it's saying is the minimum amount of necessary interference. Because there are some things you need government for, right? Military and protecting of your borders is a big deal.
Which would be like, equivocate? What word am I looking for? Equate to the mouse thing, any natural predators.
Yes. And you had an interesting thing here that I want you to go into after I finish making my point. If those mice would have been left in the state of nature, almost never in the state of nature do you end up with major overpopulation like this, with the exception of human beings. And luckily, we're also the only creatures conscious enough to understand that and be able to do something about it. Now, this guy proposed population control, and what I would propose is minimum amount of necessary interference, forcing people to compete to survive and work to survive, and not providing all those things for them creates a sort of natural selection that keeps a natural order. And I think the more we lean in that kind of libertarian direction, the more likely we are to survive some sort of population issue.
Yeah.
The other thing was what you brought up, which I think this would be a good time to kind of go into that.
The deer in Yellowstone. So in the early to mid 1900s, like 1920 through the 60s, there was a lot of wolf hunting in Yellowstone, and the wolf population was completely decimated. Well,
now was this poaching or was it legal?
I think it was legal. I'm not entirely sure.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of, they said there was a lot of hunting. So I think if it was going to be illegal, they would have said poaching. Good point. And National Geographic did a documentary on it.
I'll see if I can find something about it, and I'll link it below if I can.
Well, the wolf population down to nothing or almost nothing. Well, the elk and deer population skyrocketed. They had all the grounds in the world, or in their world, but no natural predators. So they just destroyed the landscape. There was no grass along the riverbanks, and the rivers would wash out the banks and just destroy everything. Well, in the early 90s, I think in 1991, they started reintroducing wolves into Yellowstone, and once they had a couple of good-sized packs going, they just kind of let them repopulate themselves, and
laissez-faire.
The deer population dropped. They weren't really having to compete for food. They were just...
Yeah, there was an abundance. They weren't having to compete for food, and they weren't having to compete to survive predators.
Yeah. But once the predators were reintroduced, that was the only thing they really had to worry about. But it stemmed their population. Within a few years, the rivers went back into their normal banks. The trees that they were eating the leaves off of and just decimating all the grass, everything just came back, and
everything turned out okay, right? It kind of returned to its normal state of nature.
Yes.
So I think there are two arguments you can make from that information. I think there's the idea of introducing some kind of apex predator for people, which is a little scary and a little genocidal almost in nature. But both of these conclusions actually are dangerous in nature. Now, there's one natural, we'll say, predator to people. People. Very good, yeah. I was wondering, because I didn't bring this up earlier, and I was wondering if you popped to the same conclusion. So that it seems like almost the natural conflicts and wars that we go through, which we haven't gone through a really major war since World War II.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people get like really upset about that, but if you look at the numbers, like 71 million people dead in World War II, nothing nearing that in all of them since. And it makes it sound like warring populations is almost a necessity. Which means the whole idea of like a one world order, like if, say, the UN actually became the governing body for the entire world, that would create, obviously. That would create this kind of like mouse utopia type thing. And I still think there'd be internal conflicts between people.
Oh, yeah.
But it seems like allowing our natural conflict combined with getting a more libertarian approach and creating this kind of laissez-faire idea of allowing people to compete in such a way that some people are going to have to lose, some people are going to fall at the bottom of the hierarchy, is what will allow us to sustain as a population. Now, this isn't including things like if we somehow run our planet out of resources or whatever, which I honestly don't think is as big of a threat as a lot of people say. For instance, the U.S. is now the largest exporter of oil in the world.
That was as of, like, Friday, wasn't it?
As of, like, this year sometime, yeah. I'm not sure as of what date, but the information was just released, like, last week. Which, haha, screw you, Saudi Arabia. But,
that's why, they're so rich, isn't it?
Yes.
90% of the
and it's probably got a lot to do with why our economy is doing so well. And I will say that although I think a good portion of this is Trump's pulling back on the EPA a little bit, you do have to give some credit to Obama here, because Obama saw like one of our biggest drops in dependency on foreign oil. Now, I don't think either of them affected it super directly, although Trump kind of pulled back on the EPA.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, he was president, and so if we're going to give Trump credit for the things he oversees, we should give Obama credit for things he oversees, and he saw a huge drop in dependency on foreign oil.
Yeah, and I remember like the very tail end of Obama's administration, gasoline prices, at least around here, dropped. Like
the bottom fell out. Remember that? They went from like $3.50 to like $1.70 in like a month.
Yeah, and now we're back up to like
260 between 250 and 280-ish.
For the last like month, where I normally get gas at, it's been at 260, well 261 because it's
which for me, as long as we're around 250, I don't care.
But for me, I would really love that one.
Oh yeah,
$2 or under would be great, you know.
But I mean, compared to like when we were paying $4 a gallon for gas, it's glorious.
When I first got my driver's license,
yeah, it was like I can't go much of anywhere in this here truck.
Yeah, at the truck.
Well, but when you first got the truck, gas prices were still in the like mid threes, I think.
Yeah, they're around 360, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, what really sucks is gas being at like around 360 a gallon and your fuel gauge not working.
Yeah, no kidding. So it's like I'm just gonna put in $10 and I can go one place.
Or I really want to drive my truck, so today she's gonna run on hopes and dreams.
Yeah. But rolling back to what we were talking about,
topics,
and it's cool. It's our Monday talk video, so this can be our like monumentally longest one. We have a lot of these that approach an hour. So I think our biggest things are we need some kind of conflict within us to create a sort of natural population control. And that's dangerous to say, right? Because wars in and of themselves can create horrible atrocities.
Yes.
And so it's really hard to like figure out where those lines go or what this data means. Because what we're doing right now is looking at data and trying to draw conclusions. And I'm not sure how to pull together empirical data to support my hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
I imagine it would be something like monitoring of natural populations of mice in places with low human population.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really not sure how to test yours.
Mine.
The data that you presented, how to find more empirical data to support that hypothesis. But so we're not necessarily arguing that like every few years we should fight some giant war and kill a bunch of people.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to do that, just
if you
drop
take
a nuke out of the sky every 10 years and just see where it lands.
Right, but if you take that, then you turn into Thanos, right? And I think Thanos is genuinely wrong, not only in his moral code, but in the actual truth of what he's saying. I don't think that's the right approach. There are arguments to be made for it, but I think genuinely he's actually philosophically wrong. And maybe we can do that in another video, but I think it's Looper did a video on, like, obviously Thanos is evil, but he's also wrong, and they did it justifying why. However, it seems like we need natural conflict so that we have our own predators. Or to introduce some sort of apex predator, which is really a scary thought, because if that apex predator population explodes too much, we end up in a real turmoil.
Yeah, like if somebody were to reintroduce a Tyrannosaurus Rex and Velociraptors, like drop scatter 2,000 or 3,000 of those around the planet.
Spoiler alert, the plotline of the last Jurassic World.
Oh.
At the end of it, this is the only movie that made me advocate for at least, like, knocking this little girl out. She releases a bunch of dinosaurs into the wild in California.
Can we build a wall around California?
Well, we've talked about building a wall around California before, so...
Now, with that being said, I know that not everybody in California is...
Yeah, it's mostly SoCal.
And not everybody in Southern California are...
Obviously, but their laws tend to shake out that way. So it's
move north, man. Just move north.
Yeah. Well,
not too far north.
Portland, Oregon is just as bad, if not worse, and Seattle's the same way. Seattle introduced a minimum wage law, and now they're wondering why a bunch of businesses are closing.
Well, I mean, look at Lawrence, Kansas, compared to Eudora, Kansas, or anything western Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
Salina.
Mm-hmm. But I think it really shows some logical, like, evolutionary reasoning for a more libertarian government. And when I say libertarian, I don't mean like anarcho-capitalist, because libertarians have a broad spectrum. I mean like Thomas Jefferson style liberal, where like people are generally allowed to do what they want. The central government is very small and has very little effect on your everyday life. Less laws, like less bureaucratic enforcement of laws and regulations. And I thought about this for a while. Like Joe Rogan made a really good point talking with Dave Rubin, that you do still need like building codes and stuff, because you get areas in like Africa where they don't have those building codes, where buildings collapse on people and stuff. But I think rather than like bureaucratic enforcement of those building codes, it's something like you leave it open, and if someone notices that someone's not sticking to those building codes, they can then bring a lawsuit. And so then it's kind of like the people manage themselves with those codes.
Yeah.
Because they do matter, right? Like, your house is much more structurally sound and things like you can look at our joists up here. I guess you'd call those floor joists. They're basically just big slats.
Yeah, those are floor joists. Yeah, like your floor joists typically are
16 inches?
Anywhere
studs?
Wall studs are typically 16 inches. That's, I think, the maximum they can go.
Yeah, 16 is the maximum as of when we graduated high school.
Yeah.
At least.
I've seen floor joists. I know we're
floor joists.
Joists.
I swear to God, we're not stupid.
Whatever.
I have a decently high IQ, and he was in national honor. He was invited to National Honor Society, so he's not dumb either.
Joists. It's just...
It's a joist.
It's a joist. Anyway, they can be... I've seen them 16 to 24.
Okay.
It all really depends, when you get down to it, what you're using. Those, I think, are...
Those look like they're almost 12.
I think those are 2x12s. Maybe 10s.
No, I mean 12 inches apart.
No,
those are
16.
Those are 16.
Yeah, yours are 16. I think those are 2x10s. I mean, these ones are like 6. 6 or 8. So,
yeah. But I think I definitely... We should probably wrap up, especially because my wife's home and I guarantee she's going to roll down here.
Was she gone before?
Yep. So, I think this is a good place to stop, but I would really love some intelligent discussion and some thoughts in the comments of what you guys think about this experiment, what you think it means, and if there's honestly any way we can stop something like that. But you have our thoughts on it. So, till we see you again, I'm Zach.
I'm Jake.
And we are the Dirt Road Men.
I had more to say.
You had more to say? What did you want to say?
I think, stemming the population-wise, I think that's why we go to war. We're not the only species to go to war. We're not the only species that...
No, monkeys do it.
Yeah, chimpanzees specifically. They are in... I know we've talked about this before, but they are in their own Stone Age. They're making rudimentary spears, and they're killing each other, and one tribe will go to war with the other tribe, kill all the males, or kill the dominant males, and absorb the other tribe, and they're making like little countries in their
their own
forests and
populations.
stuff.
It's really weird.
So
they'll get brutal too. Like they don't do stuff just to survive. Jane Goodall saw a thing where this monkey like ripped the head off another monkey and was like drinking the blood out of the hole.
Yeah,
it was nuts. She was like scared to publish it for a long time, I guess.
How cool! I mean, I think it should be socially acceptable to.
Careful now.
Drink a drink from the skulls of your enemies. Yeah. We don't do that, and
remember Mark?
Yeah.
I guess maybe we shouldn't go into that too deep, but
that was from one of those dummies that they put in anatomy classrooms.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, he's a dummy because he was dead.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that's all we've got, right?
Yeah.
Till we see you again, I'm Zach.
I'm Jake.
We are the Dirt Road Men.
If you like this video, hit the subscribe button, the notification bell, drop us a comment, and check out our Facebook page for daily updates.